and welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the place to be if you are a sci-fi or fantasy reader. My name is Laura and I am your host. I am a reader, writer, and whiskey drinker here to share with you some amazing self-published authors within the sci-fi and fantasy genres. On today's episode, we are talking to N.C. Scrimgeour. N.C. Scrimgeour is a science fiction and fantasy author whose books focus on character-driven stories in vibrant worlds from folklore fantasy to space opera. After completing her master's in English literature, she went on to work in journalism and marketing and communications while pursuing her passion in writing. When she's not working on her books, she enjoys playing story-driven RPGs, watching and reading all things science fiction and fantasy, and getting outdoors with the dog for a good walk. NC and I had so much fun talking about her book, Those Left Behind. So let me tell you a little bit about what this book is about. A dying planet, a desperate mission, a crew facing impossible odds. Humanity's last hope lies with them. Time is running out for the people of New Palace. Nobody knows that better than Alvera Renata, a tenacious captain determined to scout past the stars with nothing but a hand-picked crew and the promise she made to find a new home for humanity. But between navigating the treacherous chasm of dark space and first contact politics with a galactic civilization already on the brink of war, Alvera soon realizes keeping her word might not be as easy as she thought. Her only hope may be the secrets of the ancient alien way stations scattered across the galaxy. The mysterious technology could be the key to humanity's safety, or bring the unwanted attention of the long-forgotten beings who built them. This book was so much fun. It is action-packed, space opera to the max, and we had so much fun talking about it in the interview. So let's dive right in. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, the interview podcast featuring science fiction and fantasy authors. My name is Laura Juntunen, your host and the author of the Shockwave series. I am also a book club moderator, speaker, and avid reader, truly invested in every author's story. Within this podcast, I bring to you, the reader, all the behind-the-scenes secrets to how these guest indie authors bring their books into the world. If you are a sci-fi fantasy reader, then you need to hear from these authors. Let's learn about the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. Hello, Nicola, and welcome to Read It with Whiskey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I'm really excited to talk about Those Left Behind, which is just book one of the Way Stations trilogy, and we're going to dive into it in just a few minutes. But first, I would love for you to tell our listeners, why did you decide that you wanted to be a writer?
This is going to sound like really cliched, but I kind of can't remember a time that I wasn't writing stories. I remember as like a kid kind of going on holidays with family and like going to like visit some caves or something, and suddenly I'd come away with a whole backstory about the trolls that lived in the caves, and there'd be loads of like lore and world building and stuff. So yeah, ever since I was a kid, I just loved writing stories, and that kind of continued all the way through high school. I went on to do English lit at uni, and was just constantly writing, but never really tried to do anything with it until sort of the past few years, when I kind of thought, no, maybe I should kind of give this a go and see if I can write a full book.
Was there any defining moment like, okay, I'm going to do this, or was it just something that you'd been thinking about and decided to pursue it then?
Yes, I suppose there was kind of a defining moment. After I'd left uni, I'd went into to journalism. So I'd been working for a couple of years as a reporter, and I was finding that that kind of writing wasn't the kind of writing I was enjoying. There's a lot of other stuff in journalism that kind of gets in the way of that, and I think you have to have quite a thick skin as well, which is also comes as part of being an author, I suppose. But yeah, I realized that wasn't the kind of writing I wanted to do. So I ended up just quitting the job and just taking a few months over the summer to be like, right, I do know what kind of writing I want to do. I want to write stories. I'm just going to take a couple of months off and give it a shot. And I basically treated it as a full-time job over that summer, and was just like, right, I've got this idea. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to write it. And that's really kind of what started it.
Oh, so exciting. So are you writing full time now, or did you go back to the
No,
journalism road?
I went back to work. Yeah, so I've kind of got a day job now. I work as a communications officer for a university, which is really nice. I work with different sort of messages that go out to students, and I suppose it's kind of storytelling in its own way as well. And so yeah, any job that I kind of get to be a bit creative, get to do some sort of writing, and that kind of thing. Really enjoy that as a day job, and then writing itself, it ends up kind of a second full-time job on top of that, because
Oh yeah.
it's not just the writing, it's all the kind of research and then the marketing and, setting up an author website and doing social media. It's just, yeah, it's a lot of work, but I think when you enjoy it, you just do it. So
Yeah, when the passion is strong enough, you can keep plugging along on the writing.
that's it.
Would you ever want to go full-time writing, or would
I
you
mean,
always
that would be like the dream. Like
yeah.
if you could, wake up and your job that day is just to kind of write, then I can't imagine sort of anything better than that as a job. But I'm kind of like realistic at the moment, and I'm happy in the job that I'm in just now. But yeah, that would just be the dream, to hit the success that you could make it your full-time job.
Yeah, one day. We'll all get there one day. So you have written a few books now. I know you had one published that was it more fantasy, the first one you published?
So the fantasy one was like the first book I wrote. So over
Okay.
that summer, and I actually queried that, and got an agent for it. So I was kind of heading down the sort of traditional publishing route at first, but that didn't end up selling. And so I started, I kind of switched genres for a bit and started writing more sci-fi. And then wrote a few books. None of those sold either, unfortunately. It's just one of those things you kind of think, when you get an agent, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm on the road now. This is kind of happening. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work out like that. So yeah, after a few years of kind of being on submission and kind of going down the kind of trad pub experience, I decided, when kind of COVID hit, I was like, right, everything's kind of stopped now. I've got time. I want to kind of look into self-publishing and see if I can do something for myself. It's kind of about taking control and just saying, I want this to happen, so I'm going to try and make it happen for myself. So the fantasy books kind of got shelved for a bit, and I focused more on the sci-fi ones for now. But after I finished the Way Stations trilogy, I really want to come back to that one, because that was the first one I wrote, and it was the book that kind of got me my agent. So I do think there's something there. But I think I've improved as a writer over these past few years working on these books. So I really want to kind of go back to that with the experience I've got now, and see if I can kind of maybe rework it. And maybe move back to fantasy. So
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot with writers. Their first book is like their passion project, and then they just let it go, or they revisit it later on and they bring it back. So maybe that could be something you do, because you started, obviously you said you started in fantasy, and now we've dove into science fiction, not just science fiction, but this is like epic space opera. So it's high science fiction, and yeah, aliens, spacecrafts, all of that cool stuff, warp speed, traveling. So tell our listeners, what is Those Left Behind all about?
So the story is basically about the crew of this scout ship who leave behind their dying planet to try and find a new home for humanity. So their planet's kind of really isolated. There's like overpopulation, there's like scarcity of resources, and they need to find a new home. So they travel across dark space. They're trying to find a new home to live in. And when they reach this new galaxy, they kind of get there and realize that maybe not everything is as rosy there as they thought it might be. The kind of civilizations that are already there, there's a bit of tension there. They're almost on the brink of war. So the arrival's not exactly come at the best time. And then to make things worse, their arrival also triggers this kind of ancient technology that's been lying around the galaxy. So everyone's very kind of suspicious and on edge because of that as well. So it kind of follows the crew of the ship and a couple of new characters from the galaxy that they arrive in. These kind of separate stories of characters finding their way in the galaxy and also kind of working their way around all these things that are happening. And as the kind of books go on and as the trilogy come on, you kind of see how all these storylines sort of interweave and come together as the kind of consequences of the things they do start to take root.
Oh, I love it. And I'm excited to see what happens next, because in this book we have 5 points of view. And so we see their sides of the story. And where we left it, I mean, there's cliffhangers. You got to find out what happens. You got to go on to book number 2. This is not a standalone. This is a trilogy. And I like that the points of views are very different. So let's kind of like dive into that a little bit. So we have 5 different points of view. So let's start with Ridley. Who is she?
So Ridley is the character we kind of pick up the book with, and it's a nice point of view because she's kind of not as involved in the mission as the others. So you're really kind of seeing through her eyes sort of what are the problems on this planet and why is this mission sort of happening in the first place. So she comes from the surface of the planet, which has kind of been left behind in its own way as, you know, the kind of skyscrapers have shot up. And so she's kind of knows firsthand the sort of effects of all the kind of resource scarcity and the overpopulation. So she's handpicked for the mission because she's got real skills in sort of languages and translation and studying sort of ancient artifacts. So she gets picked to come along on the mission, but as she finds out, there's not everyone on that ship that really wants her to be there. There's some kind of prejudice against her being from the surface rather than the sort of upper levels of the planet. And her story is really kind of about trying to find out her place and finding a way to matter in this new home that they're looking for.
I liked her introduction to the story because the world that they're living on in the very beginning of the book, it reminds me of The Fifth Element, that movie, a mix between that and like WALL-E because like deteriorating world, you can't really survive. And so I really liked how that picked up and we got to see what that kind of world was like and where she came from. There's a thread throughout the entire story about like equality and different types of people being better or worse, inequality, all of that kind of stuff. So I like being able to see her point of view from it. And then we move on to Elvira. So who is she?
Yeah, so she's in many ways she's kind of like the heart of the story. She's the captain in charge of the mission, and she's basically made a promise to the people of her planet to say, we're going out and we're going to scout and find this new home, but we're going to come back for you, and all of us are going to go. Like, we're not leaving anyone behind. So that weighs on her a lot. And it also kind of puts a little bit of pressure on her and maybe causes her to lose sight of other things at the sight of that goal. So she's very much a kind of seen it all, knows exactly what she wants, knows exactly what she's doing, and basically will stop at nothing to make sure that she can keep that promise to the people that she left behind. So as we kind of find out and as the story goes on, that definitely puts her in conflict with some of the leaders in the new galaxy that is turn up in. So her kind of story is about how she navigates that and how far really she's willing to go to keep her promise versus, you know, not causing galactic-wide incidents in the galaxies she's found herself in.
Yeah. Oh, I think she was the character that I gravitated towards the most out of all of them. I think you said it right, where she's like the heart within the story. She's the thing that kind of connects everything. And I like her struggle. And I also like her very interesting situation where she actually has an AI within her brain who is speaking. So that is a very important character, Chase. Do you want to elaborate on that character?
Yeah, so there's actually a kind of standalone prequel to the trilogy called The Exodus Betrayal, and that's basically Elvira's whole backstory and how she's kind of turned out the way she is. And yeah, so Chase is an artificial intelligence that basically shares Elvira's mind with her. I love writing their relationship because they're so intertwined. They're almost the same person, but they're also two very individual kind of characters in their own right as well. I feel Chase is she can sometimes be a moral compass. She can sometimes be kind of a devil on the shoulder. So they've got, it's a really different kind of relationship, a much more kind of intimate friendship because they just exist together and their whole, existence is entwined. So that was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I liked reading those point of views, because Chase was always in them too. So it was like a dual point of view, but it wasn't because it was only one person. Then we also have Kojan and Rivas and Neil. We're not going to go into details of all of the characters, but they are the other points of view within this book. And all of them are connected in one way or the other. And I can sense how we're going to connect in the future, but I don't really know what's going to happen. I think where the ending leaves off, I'm very curious. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but with Elvira and Chase, I think that's where I'm the most like, what's going to happen? And that's all we'll say about the end of the book. So yeah, we have all these characters and they're all playing a part within the story, but we also have this new universe that we are diving into. And there are not only humans, there are also some aliens and different species. So you want to talk a little bit about the different species we run into?
Yeah, sure. So one of my like biggest influences when it came to writing this book was Star Wars. I kind of grew up watching it as a kid. I'm like obsessed. I love it so much. And one of the things I love about Star Wars, like all the films and the video games, I'm a really big fan of as well. It's just all these sort of different alien characters and different alien factions. So that was definitely a big influence for me when it came to writing my own sci-fi stuff, because I didn't just want it to be about humans or be really focused on kind of like the technology and the science. I wanted it to feel really alive and have all these different sort of alien characters and alien races in it. So yeah, we've got a few different ones. We've got the Iskath, who are sort of kind of reptilian, lizard, almost dinosaur-like race that live on their home world and have to wear breather masks all the time because they've not kind of adapted to the wider galaxy. And they've kind of got a sister species who evolved on a different planet who can breathe off world. And there's quite a schism between those two. Again, kind of going back to the themes of sort of prejudice. The Jarkath, who are the sister species, kind of look down on them for not having been able to adapt and get off their own planet and have to wear these breather masks all the time. So again, it sort of ties into the idea of back on New Palace, because there's people from the surface who don't have cybernetics and there's people from the upper levels who do. So it's, just showing how across species, whether it's humans or aliens, there are always kind of these prejudices that sort of people have to deal with and navigate. And we've also got the Dachrin, who are kind of like, I suppose, what you might think of as kind of stereotypical warrior race. They're got kind of bone-plated exoskeletons. They're kind of the big tough guys, but as you'll see when you read the book, there's a few different characters as well. Some of them are maybe softer than you'd first think at first glance, and they're quite involved in the sort of military side of things and the coalition, which is sort of the main sort of body, governing body in the new galaxy they come to. And then finally we've got the Seolians, which have been a really, really fun race to create, because they basically have sort of force powers, if we're going with the Star Wars analogy. They've got the ability to like absorb radiation into their skin, which they can sort of release in sort of energy blasts. So I always wanted to kind of have an alien race that could do something that wasn't quite magic, but was sort of along those lines. And that was really fun to play with, because it's not just a kind of power without any consequences. A lot of them have to deal with the fact that if they take in too much of this radiation, it sort of makes them sick, makes them be able not able to kind of control their sort of outbursts anymore. And one of the main characters in the book showing how she has to try and deal with that. And again, sort of find out her own identity and how she kind of grapples with that power that she has, but maybe doesn't want. I think a lot of the alien characters, like situations that they deal with as a species, also kind of reflects in individual characters, and kind of shows you how they deal with that, which is really fun to write.
Yeah, definitely really fun to learn about different races, and just trying to think about like being in your mind creating these different races was really fun for me, because I'm a writer, and so that's whenever I'm reading something, I'm thinking about how would I come up with something like this. And specifically a chapter when Ilion, she is an Iska, we're on her planet. And so we get to see how she interacts and lives in her own planet. I think that was one of my favorite chapters, when we got to see how she hunts for food and takes care of her family. And I was just like, this is so cool. We could just have a whole spinoff about her.
Yeah. I think that kind of those chapters on the Iskath homeworlds, a lot of people have really enjoyed those. And I think because Kojan's along with her as well, and I think he's a bit of fish out of water and doesn't really know what's happening, and you're just basically seeing through his eyes a completely kind of different culture, different way of living. And it's just really nice to kind of get transported into that and see it's not all the same. There's lots of different things happening, lots of different kinds of aliens living in different ways. So that was really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything that you really got caught on that was really difficult to figure out, or was all this kind of fluid, like, yeah, this is how it's going to be? Was there any some tough spots?
I'm definitely like a planner, like not even in
Mm.
writing, just like in life. If I'm going on holiday somewhere, I'll plan like, right, this is what I'm doing on this day, this is what I'm doing on the next. So well, yeah, when it comes to writing, I normally have like before I put a single word on the page, like I usually know roughly what my ending's going to be. I know what my main characters are going to be, and I know kind of major plot points that I kind of want to hit. And then I sort of write around that to get there. And it's not to say that nothing changes, there's characters that maybe they go in directions that I hadn't planned on, or maybe I saved a character that I planned to kill off, or vice
Yeah.
versa. But yeah, I definitely, it helps me to plan it out in advance, just so I know, if I know where the story's going, I feel I can kind of help the characters get there more. I used to
Yeah.
never plan and just sit down and write. And I never finished anything because I would get like halfway through the book and just not know where I was going with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, planning and having even if it's not a really, really firm end, and having a general idea in mind about where I want to go, yeah, really helps kind of line everything up in place.
Did you plan out all three books before you started book one, or are you going book by book?
So book one was definitely like most kind of concrete. But I did have an overall idea about how the whole trilogy was going to go. More so book one and book three, and then book two was kind of more fluid. But I definitely knew the kind of rough beats about how it was going to end and what the ending was going to look like. And when I started, which is I think helpful, because you can also kind of like foreshadow things. You can
Mm.
sort of lay the breadcrumbs and kind of concentrate on like maybe the themes that are going to appear, and kind of have that consistent throughout the whole trilogy, and which was something I was trying to do. So
Yeah, I love the little secret things that are sprinkled throughout in all books. I mean, any trilogy or series you find, most of the time the author's going to put something in there that they'll tie back to. But was there anything that you wished you had put into book one now that you're working on? Are you done with book three? Or are you still
so
working
I'm
on book
like 2 chapters away from finishing the
one?
first
Okay.
draft, so I'm like really, really close to the end now, which is a totally, it's really weird feeling after having spent years working on these. To be so close to the end
Yeah.
is bizarre.
Great.
But no, I think having sort of planned them out so much, I think I've pretty much got everything in that. Yeah, I sort of need going through the trilogy. There's always like scenes that you kind of wish you could include, or little bits, but sometimes you're just like, yeah, maybe that's been me being a bit self-indulgent, and it's not really adding too much to the story. So I'm gonna leave that for now. Actually, one of the characters in book one, Drexius, who's the Jarkath that joins Ridley on her kind of adventure, I'd actually first planned for him to be a point of view character, but I was kind of planning out and planning the scenes. I realized that all his scenes and all Ridley's scenes would be the same, so there wasn't really any need to have them both as point of view characters. So
Right.
I ended up sort of cutting him and just keeping it to Ridley. So yeah, there's some kind of decisions like that you sort of wonder, oh well, would it have been better with him as a point of view? But I think I made the right decision, but you never know.
I think that could have been interesting, but yeah, it would have been repetitive though, so I think that's
Yeah.
good. And speaking of characters, do you have one that you absolutely love to write? Is there one that is just your absolute favorite?
It's so hard. I go through phases at certain points in the story, and I'm maybe writing the scene and be like, oh, like this is my most favorite scene I've ever written, and then like a few chapters later I'll be, oh no, this is the most favorite scene I've ever written. So I think if I really, really liked one over the rest, I might be in danger of kind of putting everything into that one. And I feel that a lot of like multi point of view books, sometimes you get to a character and you're like, oh, I want to skip to the next chapter because this character is not as interesting as the rest. So I really kind of made an effort, I suppose, to give them all sort of equal weighting and kind of equal, exciting moments and drama and emotion and everything, because I think they're all kind of equally important to the story that goes on. So yeah, I'd say there's certain moments that of with each of them, and relationships in each of them, that I enjoy writing, but I don't think I can pick a favorite.
I know as I was reading, I mean, anytime I'm reading a book with multiple points of view, when I get to the end of one chapter of a point of view I really like you just said, going on to the next one, it's like, oh, I want to go back to that story. But with
Yeah.
this, I feel like you had enough of those action moments where every time I got to a new chapter, I was like, oh, we're going back to their scene. Like, yes, I want to find out what happened. So I think you did really well with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I read this book pretty quickly, was because I was like, okay, well, I just had Aldera's chapter, but I can't see her for another more like 3 or 4 chapters, but I want to get back to her. So I was like, okay, I'm going to read through, but then the same thing would happen with the next chapter. So it was very easy to binge read. And I just really liked that component. I think you did really well with that.
Thank you.
Bringing everybody along, yeah. So thinking about this trilogy as a whole, who do you think is the ideal reader?
Pretty much for me, this is like a love letter to the kind of sci-fi that I grew up loving. So it's basically just meant to be fun. It's like it has got kind of, you know, important themes and stuff in it, but I just wanted to have fun with this. And I grew up, like I said, loving stuff like Star Wars. Really enjoyed the Mass Effect games, and they're very big influence on this as well. And things like Firefly TV series and The Expanse, another big one. Really just kind of the sci-fi that has characters at the heart. Not that there's anything kind of wrong with the sort of the science side, the heavy kind of tech side, but that's never been what's drawn me in and interested me about sci-fi. It's always been about the characters. And yeah, so any sort of, if you're a fan of Star Wars or Mass Effect or The Expanse or any kind of sci-fi that just puts the characters front and center and gives you like a really wide range of characters to root for, flawed characters, they don't always make the best decisions, it doesn't always turn out right for them, but yeah, and it's just on a really big scale as well. So if you like kind of that whole galaxy spanning, lots of different planets, lots of different factions, and kind of space battles, it's got a bit of everything. So yeah.
It does. It even has like the mystery, like why are these way stations even present in the universe? And that is obviously going to be a running theme, because you're not going to find out in book 1. You're going to get hints and get clues. I'm excited to go on to book 2. And book 2 was actually, as we're recording this, it was just released recently, correct?
Yes, just a couple of weeks ago, the end of April. So book 2 is out now as well. And then I'm hoping to be able to release book 3 towards the end of this year. So
okay. Oh, so exciting. I'm so excited for that. So then after this, you said you might go back into fantasy land. Do you think you're going to go back into fantasy, or do you want to do a little bit more science fiction or something different?
I think I'm going to go back into fantasy. I really want to revisit, like I said, that first story that I did. It was based around the kind of Selkie mythology, and there was a lot of kind of Scottish kind of mythology, which is obviously kind of where I'm from. It's very kind of close to me. So yeah, I'm really kind of already thinking about things and already kind of jotting down ideas. So I'm really excited to kind of dive back into that. So both science fiction and fantasy, I think, is just where my kind of excitement and passion lies. I write across both of those genres, but I don't know if I would write outside them, just because the thing I enjoy most, I suppose, is just creating these new worlds and new kind of species or characters and having a bit of magic in them. That's just what I enjoy reading and watching on TV and playing games about, and that kind of transfers through to my writing as well. It's just worlds that you can just really dive into and get lost in.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, me too. I love the science fiction, fantasy. Is there any other genres that you do read, or is it just primarily sci-fi fantasy?
Primarily those two. Yeah, I always like try now and again to kind of pick up something else, you know, whether it's kind of like, I don't know, like a thriller or like kind of maybe a romance now and then. But I think it's good to read outside your genre as well if you're a writer, just to kind of get ideas about how different pacing is done, because obviously the pacing in a thriller is going to be very, very different to the pacing in a huge kind of epic fantasy. But yeah, where my kind of heart really lies and what I'll always kind of want to dive into is sci-fi and fantasy.
Oh, so that just means you'll have to come back on the show when you have another fantasy book out. Yeah. I love it. Oh, well, this is Read It with Whiskey, and it wouldn't be Read It with Whiskey without talking a little bit about whiskey. But I hear you don't even like whiskey, so,
what is it that you like terrible. To drink? You've got someone on from Scotland who doesn't really like whiskey, so I feel like I'm letting the whole country down here. So no, I'm not a big whiskey drinker myself. I will say my dad's favorite is a Lagavulin, so I'll give a wee shout out to him. Instead, but no, I'm much more of a glass of wine or a cocktail kind of girl.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I'll drink my wine every once in a while, just prefer the whiskey. Yeah. All right, Nicola. So where can people find your books? Where can they find you and follow along with your journey?
Yeah, so all my books are available as ebooks via Amazon Kindle. They're also on Kindle Unlimited as well. So if you have a subscription for that, you can read them for free. And you can get them in paperback from Amazon, but also a variety of kind of other stores as well, Book Depository, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble. So you can go and find the links to those different places as well. I've got a website, ncscrimgeour.com. You can find the links to books on there, and also just find a little bit more about the kind of backstory. I've got a wee blog on there that I update about various bits and pieces that's going on as well. And then I've got social media wise, I am like at Scrimscribes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's all at Scrimscribes. So you can find me on there as well.
Awesome. I love it. And then I just recently, I think I subscribed to your newsletter and I got Elvira's origin story. Is that still something that's out there?
Yeah, so there's a short story prequel to the Waystations trilogy. Yes. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you can get a free download for that.
Well, Nicola, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had such a great time with you today.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Nicola and I had such a fun time talking about her book, and I cannot wait to dive into book 2. And you guys, I feel like she has so many more things coming. We really have to keep an eye out for her. And of course, if you want to watch this interview, head on over to patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey to watch this interview along with all of the other interviews from our past authors. In our next episode here on Read It With Whiskey, we're going to be talking to D.C. Gomez. She is the author of Death's Intern, and this is an urban paranormal fantasy with witches and mystery and a 5,000-year-old cat. You guys, you can't miss this episode. But until then, talk to you soon. You've been listening to an episode of Read It With Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and I just wanted to personally hop in and say thank you so much for listening. Your support of the podcast means so much to me, and I would really appreciate it if you could go onto your favorite podcast platform and rate and review the show. By rating the show, you're going to help more people find the podcast so then we can grow. Once you review the show, share it on your social media, share your favorite episode with your friends, and come back next time to hear more from self-published authors. I'll talk to you soon.